we get started tonight, you'll know I'm Taylor Fox in the Middle Tennessee Field Rep with Tennessee Wildlife Federation, the Hunting and Fishing Academy. We'll talk about that here briefly in a second. But I do have a guest tonight, a last-minute guest at that, but he's definitely helping me out. Josh, a good friend of mine and avid fly fisherman with his fiance, soon-to-be wife, Jesse.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about tonight, what we're going to learn. By the end of this, I want you to be able to do a couple things, and my goal is to basically have a base of knowledge so that way you could walk in if you don't own a fly rod and at least know what you're doing, if not feel like you're getting oversold or undersold at a store, right? I want you to feel comfortable when you're doing this. And then maybe the components of a fly set up in the correct order. We'll go over that, and I have a very crude chart that I've taken together, but it works and shows you. And then two types of flies used in fly fishing. All right, but starting out with fly rods. Everyone has their favorites, but as you see, we're going to talk about different setups for fishing in Tennessee tonight. Let's see, Q&A. I only saw one question. Matt said, and does an over 65 need a trout stamp? Anonymous asked. Yeah, so I'm about 95% sure over 65 does need a trout stamp. It's separate. It's a funding that TWRA has. I could be wrong on that. I don't have a book in front of me. I can definitely get back to you and let you know for sure, though. And then I only saw one question. Well, Matt, we'll get it at the end, so that way you couldn't miss the first ones then, Matt, since you didn't see them. But fly rods and setups. So two big questions you want to ask yourself when what type of water are you fishing, and then what species are you targeting? And so why does that matter? Rod length. Well, if you're in a big stream, you don't want what I've got here for my main setup, a 9'5" rod to go fish in the little creek, the Harpeth River, real shallow and, real narrow. You're just gonna get tangled up and get frustrated. If I want a shorter rod, and then how much wind are you doing? We'll talk about that in a minute, how to load your rod and casting and all that good stuff here in a second. But those are the two main things to ask yourself when you're looking to buy a fly rod or borrow one. What type of water are you fishing? And then what species of fish are you targeting? All right. Most common for trout here in Tennessee, though, is a 9-foot rod, 9'5" weight here in Tennessee. Some people might differ and say, well, I like this or I like that. But most common, I think, when you walk into a fly shop, they're going to suggest a 9-foot rod with a 5-weight line. Let me see here. Richard asked, does that sportsman's license cover the trout stamp? The sportsman's license does cover that. I think it's not an extra fee. You just have to select a box. But look at the regulation book. It's right there. When you have a sportsman's, it'll tell you everything that covers you below. Josh, do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'm doing some Googling right now for the questions. So it doesn't look like someone over 65 does need a trout stamp, but I want to confirm that before it's a definite answer. So when I see some of the questions rolling in, I'm going to do some research and try to get those answered.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so trout in Tennessee, 9-foot rod, 5-weight line is your basic. If you're looking to buy something cheap or buy something used, that would be a great way to start. And then smallmouth or largemouth bass, 7 to 8 weight. Maybe a 6-foot or maybe a 6-weight on your rod. I still like a 9-foot rod, but just a little different. If you want to take a picture of this chart, it's sort of across the board. It's hard to understand if you don't know what you're looking at, but the red numbers are what they suggest for what you're targeting. Obviously, we don't have any tarpon in Tennessee, so this chart is not based only on Tennessee. It's sort of generic across the board that I pulled offline. But anywhere in there, those highlighted reds are commonly accepted. And if you're a little confused on what we're talking about, don't worry, we're going to get there. So most common here, like I said, is a 9-foot rod with a 5-weight line for trout. All right, rod length. Everyone says, is longer better? Does a cane pole work? Fiberglass? What do you want? What kind of rod do you want? Well, short rods, ideal for fishing in heavily overgrown and small streams. Like I sort of mentioned, if you think about a fly rod here real quick, you're going to see some drawings here, but if you want to see the length of a fly rod, this is your rod action. So we're going to talk about that here on this past slide, but how much give it gives and bend. We're talking about how much weight when you're actually loading it. So when you're stripping that fish in, if you're reeling it in, how much action that rod's going to give or how much bend it's going to give. And so that also will affect you when casting. So thinking about length of rod, we'll talk about actions of rod as well, but some of the short rods, fishing heavy diverse cover, short rods are less affected by wind in a windward cast. Only in a windward cast, though. So if you have a short rod and you're not using the windward cast, which is a harder cast to learn, I would say, in my opinion, then it's a little harder. And then it's also lightweight. So if you're doing some backpacking in East Tennessee, or if you're going in the mountains and you want to just pack a rod just in case you find the perfect trout stream, it's a lot easier to pack a short rod. Long rods, you have to be less precise in your timing. So as you're thinking about Matt Damon in the water as a river runs through it, or on that video movie, you think about forward and back, like an old ticking time clock. Think about more forgiveness is easier with a longer rod. So as you're learning, I always put a long rod in everyone's hand. At the workshops, I have all long rods, so less frustration. And then as you're actually fishing and have a hook on there, if you have a short rod, there's a lot more tangling in your tippet. But better for hooking fish at longer distances, a little easier to control and more quicker to bring them in my opinion, and then better for longer casts. So, but if you are looking to buy a fly rod, you don't have one yet, or if you've already bought one, don't be intimidated. You're going to walk into a fly shop and see everything from 6.5 to 11, 12-foot saltwater rods that they sell. But 8.5 plus is considered a long rod. 8 and shorter is considered a short rod. So that's sort of your base, 8 to 8.5. 8.5 and up is what I consider a long rod, and 8 below is considered a shorter rod. So any questions on that? Let's see. Q&As. What is considered a short rod and long rod? Anonymous asks. Well, hope I answered that by accident. That's great. So 8.5 plus is considered long, and 8 and below is considered short. And then I'm a retired photographer from Chicago and have been in Tennessee about 4 years. I have no hunting or fishing partners. Do you think that you could? Typically we don't share contact information, Joseph, on here. It's just sort of a free, non-committal type thing, as our virtual classes are. A lot of our workshops and stuff in person, we do allow people to share contact information and make fishing buddies and partners. But typically on the virtual classes, we don't share contact information. So I would say that's not possible tonight. Good questions, though. Large bodies of water work better with longer rods and help you add distance to your cast and cover more water. When in clear water, fish get a little boat shy as well. So if you have a boat or a canoe, or if you're on a guided trip and it's really clear water, you might have a longer rod or borrow one just so you can push that fly a little further out, so they don't get boat shy. But casting away from the boat is important. All right, so this is that crude picture I've pulled, but don't jump me yet. I've simplified it down with some words so you don't get too lost. But for the most part, fast action, stiffer, more powerful while fighting fish, and more power in your cast. So you see my parentheses note there, best friend in the wind. Because if it's windy fishing, or if you think about people always checking the forecast before they go fishing, you're like, well, is it windy? What's the wind doing? What's the cloud cover doing? What's the water temperature? All these things go into your positive or negative day of fishing. But a fast action rod is best in the wind. Now, medium action can be used for long and short, and I think it's the best for a beginner because it's more forgiving. You're not going to have to worry about your cast catching up to you or getting too fast and getting a nod or a big whip in there. And then a slow action is not your friend in the wind. It's going to get taken everywhere. So if you think about throwing a plane fast versus slow, if you throw it slow, it's going to be more affected by the wind versus throwing it fast and getting it out of the wind works a lot better. But it's also good for small streams and short casts. But I will tell you, you're going to hook into a bass or something with a slow action rod. You're going to think that you hooked into a giant, and it's going to come up and be a little 4-inch trout. But any questions on that? I know I'm sort of covering it fast, and Josh is clearing questions and everything like that. Anything you've seen, Josh, I missed?
I don't think so. I think you covered what is a short rod and long rod. Looks like Joseph wants to get together and maybe fish sometime. We can maybe exchange contact information after the call, Joseph.
Yeah, no, I can definitely email Joseph. But for quick reference, if you're already, for some of the ones that are here, some of the things I like in pairing my rods is I like to fish some streamers and poppers on big water with a fast action rod personally. Um, Medium action, I'll fish anything. But in the slow streams and ponds, anything short casting, just little sight fishing, I'll do with a slow action rod. I don't have it up here in my office desk tonight, but I enjoy that. All right, so reels, everyone's seeing price tags on reels, I'm sure, and they're saying to themselves, what to choose? Well, I'm here to tell you what every fly shop and YouTuber won't tell you, that the reel doesn't really matter. It can be as basic. All it really does is holds the backing, holds the fly line, holds the tippet, and if you're stripping fish in, you're not even using the reel. It's basically just a storage device. So don't think that you have to go into a fly shop and see the coolest colors and the coolest materials and think that you have to spend an arm and a leg. It basically just holds the line. So, but real purpose, stores fly line and backing and provides drag resistance when hooked if you use the reeling method, not the stripping. So a real quick explanation of that. It's hard to explain in pictures, but I have some videos going out in the follow-up email to explain it. When you reel fly line in, if you were to hook into a fish, you're not going to set the hook like you would if you're a traditional bass fisherman, or even maybe if you've only fished for brim, you would know. But as you set the hook on fly fishing, all you have to do is lift the rod in the air. Just lift it up and it hooks. And then there's two options. You can have your reel attached to your rod, and then you can pull it in by hand. And so you're not actually reeling anything. You're not even using the reel. You're stripping it. And that's why you constantly see in every fly fishing movie or video you've watched a huge pile of line at someone's feet. That's because they're stripping and bringing the fish in by hand, pulling it slowly. If you were going to reel it in, your reel would be more important, but reeling it in, you would reel it in, you'd hear that drag noise depending on what your settings are, and you could reel it in. But it is harder, I think, personally, to have successful hook sets when you're starting out fly fishing using the reel, because what you end up having a tendency to do is lifting up and you have that fish tight, and when you switch to the reel, that little bit of slack happens and that hook will slip out of the trout's mouth or a bass. And so that's harder to control sometimes. And it can be really frustrating, honestly, when you're learning to miss those, when you feel the fish and then it gets away. A one size reel does not fit all. The biggest thing here is does it balance your rod? So when you're picking a rod, a fly shop, or if you're buying used on the market, or if you're getting one for free, if you just got a rod and you want to upgrade the reel or whatnot, you want to make sure it's balanced. This is something you're holding all day. Your cast is going to be affected by it, right? If you got a lot of weight of the reel and you're holding that cork, let me show you the next slide just so you get an idea. So the cork handle there above the reel, that's where you're actually holding above the reel with whatever your dominant hand is to actually cast. And so if that reel is real heavy, and you're throwing it, it could be throwing you off, messing you up, especially if you're fishing all day or something like that. So balance is most important with your rod and reel setup. But the traditional way is to match the rod line weight with the reels. Now, all of your rods, typically, if you buy one, will have it on the handle. So this is my main rod right here, an Orvis Encounter, before everyone asks, but it'll tell you right here on the rod what weight they suggest. And so this Orvis Encounter is a 9 foot, 3.5 ounce, 5 weight line. So it's telling you right there all the information you need. So you want to get a reel that matches up with that, that's also balanced. But it's not always the case. It can be something different, especially if you get into saltwater fishing or something very specific. You might be unbalanced, but that's something a professional can help you with. An Orvis store, a Fly South, a local shop, even a guide that if you go fishing with, you can try out their setups and stuff like that, and then base one off that. But the material of the reel is based on the water you're fishing. If you're fishing saltwater, obviously you don't want something to rust up and get all nasty on you when you store it. So something to think about. Pit. All right, rod setup, we already touched on it. Sort of your hand, when your dominant hand that you're going to cast with is going to be holding that cork. Usually I like to keep the bottom of my hand, if I'm right-handed, the bottom of my hand an inch or two above the reel, and as I do some casting. But here is the basic setup, and this is what I was talking about. Don't make fun of my drawings, but we're trying to get it all across here. Here is your backing, the back with that yellow line. I've got it all labeled, but that is your biggest part of the reel. Usually 500 to 300 yards. If you buy it from an Orvis store or any fly shop, they're probably gonna put the backing on there for you. I brought this reel out tonight to show you. You can sort of see my fly line here is green, or it might look teal on the video tonight, but that orange line underneath is all of my backing. So that's usually just standard fly rope or backing rope, and then it's your fly line, and then leader or tippet. And so it's all connected. So there's all your feet and how much is typically in there, depending on how much you're doing. Obviously, if you're doing some saltwater fishing or something like that, you might have longer links in there or mixed up depending on what type of fishing you're doing. But for the most part, this is the breakdown. Where did you get that? Chris. Fish so much faster than the average person can reel. Don't go use the reel unless a fish takes the line out of your hand. Chris is right. They definitely can swim faster than you can reel, and so don't reel. All right, so that's the drawing. Pretty crude, but just a basic overview one more time, because it can get confusing, especially when you go into a store and you ask what needs to go on first, and they're asking you questions if you're new. I would say make sure you tell the fly shop you're new and this is your first reel or rod. They're here to help you. From everyone I've ever met at a fly shop or at a fly fishing event, they just want more people into the outdoors. So fly backing fills the gap between the reel and the fly line. That way your fly line doesn't hold that memory and be uncastable. So if you think about a bait caster or traditional spinning, that monofilament or that braid can remember if it sits for too long or if it's out in the sun or something, it can remember that twist, and you don't want that with your fly line. You want it to be straight. And then fly line has several parts. It's tapered down from the head of the line. Most modern fly lines have a loop at the end, but if they don't have a loop, you might tie something like a nail knot to the end, but the loop.
Hey, Taylor, there's a question about what is the leader as well while you're on that.
Yeah, no, we'll get there. We're almost there. We're almost there. So you can't really see my background. Let me see. This is the hard thing to examine. So I'm not going to pull this all out to the backing, but you see the fly line. It's a much lighter, fly line is much lighter than any type of line if you've never fly fished before that you would do it. It's almost like almost like if you pick up a marshmallow, you think because it's a jumbo marshmallow, it's going to be heavy, but it's not. It's like a super lightweight floating line. So when you get down there and we move from the fly line to the leader, depending on what type of fishing you're doing, you're going to have a leader. Most of those leaders are going to be tapered. Some of them are one piece if you get like a cheap beginner kit or something like that, but a leader is how it attaches to the fly line. It's usually a loop-to-loop connection. So you just basically have two loops sewn into those and you thread them through each other, and it's a loop-to-loop connection. Tippet to leader, if you're fishing that way, is a double surgeon's knot. I like to do 3 or 4. There we go. But 3 to 4 wraps works on that surgeon's knot as well. If you don't know how to do a surgeon's knot, I can link a video in the follow-up recording of this, but that's how that would work. And then some of your leader and tippet is, depending on what you're fishing, a dry fly or a wet fly, different weights. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Tippet charts and all that good stuff. We caught up on questions, Josh? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Here's a new one that just came in. What is the lifespan of the line? I have a reel with a 14-year-old fly line? Do I need to replace it?
Richard, I would say it might be worth replacing that at 14 years because it's probably set in a garage somewhere that may or may not have been temperature controlled. But if you're just getting back into it, I wouldn't hurt to go try it. You know what I mean? You might lose the biggest fish of your life, or that could be a fish story. That's up to you, Richard. But fly line, if you think about it, only that front half is used, right? It's like the fly line. If you're casting and you're never casting more than, what, 50, 75 feet, if you're, depending on what type of fishing you're doing and where you're fishing, I mean, only that front part is getting used and quote unquote abused over and over again. And so a lot of times what's changed is not the fly line, it's the tippet. And so you'll see those cool pictures of, videos and YouTubers with the backpacks that have these little circles on them with tippet. So they have all different sizes. We'll look at a chart here in a second. But first, if you're actually doing this at home and you're not going to a shop, or maybe you don't live close to a shop, or maybe you are just independent and you are a DIYer, 100%. You want to pick the backing size based on your target. When you put the backing anywhere from 50 to 200 yards, like I put on there, most shops done this. I've never done it myself, to be completely frank. I've always gone to the shop and they've put the backing on there and always had a good conversation and ask how the water's fishing lately and what they've been biting on, or what the hatch is, and then choose your fly line. When you buy your fly line, it's going to be in a box. If you're at the shop already, they're gonna hook it up and tie that knot and put it on for you. If you're doing it yourself, you'll have to tie those knots and put it on and measure it out. But choosing your line starting off is easy, and then match the line weight with your rod weight. So, like I said, easy right here on the end of my rod tube. Tells you right there, 9 foot, 5 weight. So this rod is designed to have 5 weight on it. Some people have asked in the past, and actually some emails recently, most backing weight, what poundage is it? Well, if I'm going to buy it, what if I already have it? What do you want to buy for backing? Most backing stuff is 20, 30, or 40 pounds. I would say in Tennessee, I've never seen 40. I would say mostly it's 20 pound, but 30 to 40 will be for those rods targeting bigger fish in salt water. If you're going to the coast, or if you want to have 2 setups, you can do some bigger stuff. But if you're getting into anything that needs more than 20-pound backing here in Tennessee, send me a picture. Let me know, because I'm curious. All right, leaders and tippet. Leaders and tippet can be a whole whirlwind of questions, and it makes it even more confusing when you go into somewhere like Bass Pro or a local shop if you don't know what you're looking for, or maybe you don't want to ask because they're in all these packs like this. They come in and you're like, what am I looking at here? Just, and it's all clear and they're all tapered and they have the back, they have the numbers on them and how long they are, what the weight is, what the poundage is. And you're like, what do I buy? Do I buy the little packs that are pre-wound? Do I buy the pre-run spools? And that way I can have more when I'm on the water. That all just depends on how much money you want to spend and how far you want to get into it. But let me catch up with some questions here. What is Lee done? First picture with rod and reel, there was a.
I think most recent one, Taylor, Matt Carter is asking, what's the typical cost for a beginner setup? I think you could probably get a setup between 200 to 400, and go catch some fish. 400 might be even high.
Yeah, no, I definitely would agree with that. I mean, you could probably even get it cheaper, honestly, if you catch a sale or something like that. Some fly shops actually have consignment reels where like they're selling them for other people as well. So if you go in, have a budget in mind, and I can promise you there are people on this class right now watching me teach that know much more than me, and they've made comments. But you can go into a fly shop and tell them up front, hey, I just want to look at what the products are. I want to get my grasp and figure out where I want to go with this. And some places even rent rods. So if you think about it, you want to just try, there's no shame in saying, hey, I'm just looking today. Here's the budget I have in mind. Even if they don't offer anything in that budget, I promise they can give you suggestions on where to look, what to get. And they might even have an old rod they might pull out and sell you themselves, because fly shops are not places to be nervous about. They're just real calm. I know they get intimidating, and that's what a lot of feedback I've had over the workshops in the past is, well, if I went to my fly shop and everyone in there knew each other and they knew what they were talking about, they were tying flies, and how do I even know what to buy? Well, the big things you have to remember are they're there to help you, and they want you to be a future customer, so they want to educate you. So don't think I just skipped over leaders and tippet. So as we went back to that diagram, it goes the backing, which you probably never see, to your fly line, to your leaders, to your tippets. Now, what are all these numbers on there? If you want to take a picture of something, this is definitely something to take a picture of. A leader and a tippet chart. So basically, if you think about the smaller the number, the larger the pound test, I know it's backwards. So a 0x is thicker than a 8x. So if you look at those numbers there, it breaks it out for the diameter. The X number is supposedly the number of how many times it went through a thinning process. So, for example, 2 to 8. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Don't hold me to that, but I think that is true. I've heard it the whole time I've been fly fishing. But so an 8X line was thinned 8 times versus a 1X time was only thinned once. So, but here in Tennessee, bass and trout, more specifically bass, I use 2 and 3X. Trout 4 to 8. No, 8X is not always needed. So someone out there that's trout fished before, they're like, well, I'm pulling them in on 4 and 4X and I'm doing it great. Well, you're right. But sometimes if you get to those heavy fish spots like the Caney or somewhere down towards the Watauga, where you get in a spot where everyone knows and you can wade in there, they might get a little line shy. So I want a little thinner line to maybe hide myself as I throw it in there. But 4 to 8 for trout, and 2 and 3 is what I use for bass. I will say I'm guilty a lot of times of just putting a 4 on there and fishing for both. So if you're feeling lazy and you don't know what you want to put on there, you can just put a 4 and fish for both, and you'll be successful. But this will often have to do and how often the fish are seeing flies. So right now in the spring, a lot of people are out fly fishing. In the wintertime, and they're not as line shy, you're probably easier and you can get away with more. But how small your fly is, think about the weight of the fly as well. So I've got boxes and boxes of flies on this desk, but long story short, they're all different sizes. They're different weights, different hook sizes for different things. The weight of that fly as you throw it, can give you a nice straight presentation and land. If you think about how you want your fly to land on the water, as you're getting your cast down, you don't have to worry too much. But once you start getting nitty gritty and you're throwing that fly and that line lands, think about you holding your hand and it coming flat. You want that fly to land and present itself. You don't want the line to go past it. You don't want that leader and tippet in front of it. And if you're fishing in any current or from a boat, you want to make sure that you're mending the line. There's movies about it. They talk about it in every YouTube video, mending the line. When that trout or that fly is floating down and presenting itself, you don't want the line in front of where that is to give away that it's coming. So you want to mend that line back, or AK, put a little flick of the wrist and keep that line, that leader, that tippet all behind the fly. And so the fly is the first thing you want to see. But that chart, you see the breaking shrink and the fish type, right? So that's pretty standard across the board. Do you have any questions about that, Josh? What do you use here in Middle Tennessee?
Me personally, I usually go kind of 5X, 9 foot, just your typical run of the mill type of setup. What about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is all my stuff right here. Just
Yeah.
we're using basic stuff, 3 and 4.
Yeah.
I have an 8X. I think it's in the garage, but I don't have a whole reel of it. I just have a pack trying to keep it small because I tend to get really tangled up with those. Because even though you want to try as hard as you can, the 8X is really thin. And so if you mess up or, every now and then you go tree fishing. When you go tree fishing with an 8X, you get a lot of knots, and then you end up getting mad, and then you cut it off and put a 4X on.
Chris Nish says he uses a 9 foot 4X with 4X leaders.
And he's a fishing guide, so there is the answer.
Bro, so.
That is the man. There's the answer. 4X. You heard it here first. Taylor and Josh, 4X. All right, fly selection. You're about to ask me 1,000 questions, but just hold on. We're going to get there. Nymphs and dry flies. So primarily are for trout. Depends on your area and what insects are in your area, along with the time of the year. We are currently in, or I would say, would you say we're already in the hatch, Josh? Or would you say the cicadas are an interesting throw in there, right? So right now in Middle Tennessee, we have a cicada hatch, and it's a little different, a little bigger, but I would say that it's not always like this in the spring, but currently we do have some interesting, different patches of bugs on the rivers. But like I said, these are all the nymphs and dry flies. You can see all the names. But the basics of them are, you got the woolly booger, you got the wolves, you got the little terrestrials is the word I'm thinking of. Terrestrial, so ants, bugs, bees, anything like that. You're just mimicking something that would land on top of the water, right? That dry fly, what's going to land on top of the water, and those fish are going to rise to eat it. And so that's something to think about. If you want to get into tying flies, the best thing I think you should do is look up Orvis's. Has a free fishing learning, fish learning 101 on Orvis's. You don't even have to have an account. You can go on Orvis and learn how to tie flies, and they do live videos all the time on social media. If you want to see in-person demonstrations, the Middle Tennessee Fly Fishers is a club here in Middle Tennessee, and they meet the first Wednesday of every month. I'll be there tomorrow night if you want to come see me. We're doing a meeting, and before the meeting, they always do fly tying. And I know the Orvis shop in Nashville with Patrick as the manager there. I know they do some fly tying classes. I don't know if they have a fee or not, so don't hold me to it. And I know Fly South has some even celebrity fly tyers coming in, so some big time fly fishers coming in to tie certain types of flies. And so that's a hands-on class if you want to get into tying your own flies. Definitely reach out to your local shop wherever you are. I know I'm talking about Middle Tennessee a lot because I live in Hendersonville, but if you live in East Tennessee, I promise you're going to find a fly shop. If you're in West Tennessee, come on and see me in Middle, because you probably don't have that many fly shops over there that I know of, but I could be wrong. Maybe some close to Mississippi. Josh, you know of any in West Tennessee?
West Tennessee, I'm not familiar with.
No, you'll be.
State. This might be biased, but Fly South is hard to beat. So you're right. Come to Middle Tennessee and check them out.
Yeah, if you go to Fly South, hit up Blake. You can tell him you talked to Taylor on the virtual class, and he'll probably be like, Taylor doesn't know what he's talking about. And then you can be like, you're with the right Blake. All right, Tucker's also in there too. I won't leave out Tucker. All right, but streamers. What is streamer and fly fishing? We talked about dries and nymphs, and the streamers. Like, don't come at me, but the closest thing to a lure is a spin cast fishing would say is a streamer, in my opinion, because it simulates a bait. Examples of what streamers imitate are minnows, shad, crayfish, any other aquatic bug you think about, right? Streamers are typically made with a hook wrapped in natural feathers or fur. So if you're also a hunter and you're looking to move into fishing and angling and fly fishing, if you're harvesting ducks or turkeys, or even deer hide, start thinking about, hey, I could save that and give it to somebody that's tying flies. So think about all the things you could save and do and turn into your fly fishing. But so hook wrapped in natural, so feathers or fur, synthetic materials, polyester, mylar sometimes. Streamer fishing is the act of fly casting and retrieving the streamer fly. So you're going to cast this out, make a good presentation, and as you cast that out, you're gonna strip that line and bring it in, and it's acting like a bug. And so depending on what you tie or what you pick up with your woolly booger, right? So they're typically bigger. A couple of them I got here, nothing crazy. Just some black, a little longer. That one's got a real tight body on it. But streamers, you think about also if you're looking to go out of the state of Tennessee, they're bigger. They're going to be those big flies. Streamer fishing is aggressively done, so you're actually getting that fish to react to you. And so there's some of the bigger flies, like I said, but you'll catch larger fish when you do get successful with the hookup on the streamer. It isn't the most effective way, in my opinion, of catching a fish. So if you're new here and you're new to fly fishing, I don't suggest throwing the biggest streamer you can find and going fishing. I think he will end in frustration. But if you're new, I would suggest a nymph fishing, something through the water, something small. You're going to target all the fish. And then even if they're not hungry, maybe they just want a snack, that nymph a lot of times can get the attention of somebody. There are a few instances where streamers are going to work. First, if you're able to see high numbers of bait fish or crayfish, or anything in the water, and you can see it, you're going to get that aggressive bite because there's going to be more bait in the water, so you're more likely to get bit, get a hookup. And then I say fish them in the deeper parts. If you're I do a lot of lake fishing, so you have to forgive me. I'm not on the Caney all the time, like some are looking to do when they go. But on Old Hickory Lake, if you want to go streamer fishing with a fly rod out of a boat or from the bank, I'm looking for a deeper pool. I'm also looking for where the small creek comes into the bigger part, so that's where a lot of the fish can crowd up. So I'll go put the boat in, or I'll stand on the bank and cast further away and try and bring it across that inlet to that tributary. So something to think about. You want them to fall and then imitate a wounded bait fish a lot of times too. So if you fish in deeper portions, you might not always want to be on top. You want it to sink a little bit, but something to think about. Here's a great picture I found, and it gives an example of how diverse streamers are. And so the ones I have and a lot of the ones I'm fishing, as you sort of see, that gold thread is actually wrapped around the hook shank and on top of that material. So you can see the gold and get the flash. But in different parts of the country and the state, that woolly booger and that half and half and that deceiver, all those different color patterns, that could mean the difference in hooking up into fish all day and never getting a bite, or never setting the hook and pulling one in, because it's the subtlest differences that make all the difference. So don't get frustrated. But streamers are going to work when there's high bait fish. Like I said, the water's a great time. Right now is a great time to tie on a streamer. The woolly booger, everyone talks about the woolly booger, but it is a type of streamer to use for almost every type of fish. But trout seem to enjoy them, in my personal opinion, here in my limited fishing in Tennessee. But I've heard of some great big trout being caught in other parts, when I'm with a guide or a buddy of mine, and they're talking about fishing in Arkansas or Virginia. They're talking about catching some bigger trout using woolly boogers. But you can find these anywhere from size 2 to size 8. And there's also variety packs for, like you see here, from the grab and go perfect catch flies. When I'm fishing a woolly booger, it's usually a 5 or 6 weight, 3 or 4x on my leader. You don't need any tippet when you're fishing a woolly booger. It's a little common misconception. You can use sinking, a floating line. They'll work great on all types. It's a big presentation. Like I said, you're going to get a big reaction when you get something on a woolly booger. We'll move on now. If you're not interested in fishing for trout and you want maybe some bass fishing, maybe some smallmouth, maybe you don't want to go to the Caney because it's too crowded, or maybe you want to stick to your backyard because it's close and convenient, you can fish more. I would suggest if you want to fish for some bass, you need to get some poppers. Now, poppers. What are poppers? That is a pretty box of poppers in front of you. But there are a couple different types. There's a scooped fish, or a scooped mouth, which you can't really tell from that picture other than that blue one there in the bottom in the middle. You sort of see how it's that concaved in. So it's actually taking water and pushing it out as you pull it across and strip it across the top. There's also flat face poppers where they're not taking that much water in. So if you think about it, they have that scoop mouth, a lot of them, and most common style of popper you'll find in shops, most of them have that scooped mouth. Many people consider a popper as a fly is meant to pop in and spit all the time. That really is a subtle presentation, just to sort of pull it across the water, and as you're stripping line and pulling it, you're getting the reaction and it's stopping. The reality is that a subtle presentation, I like to cast it in and let it sit for a second, and then pull slowly, and then not trying to get the big aggressive bite. If you think about it, the faster you pull, you might get a big fish, but you might also miss 2 or 3 small ones that maybe are not looking to eat, but they were curious. But something to think about on the poppers. What do you think, Josh? Are we caught up on questions?
Yep, I think we're all good.
Shopping downtown. Hey, well, we can share that. Joseph said the shop in downtown Knoxville lets you go out back and practice without buying the setup. You could spend all day there, and they were very nice. They also have 11 guides. Can't wait to go back. That's awesome, Joseph. Thanks for sharing that. So if you're in Knoxville and go to that shop, perfect. All right. So if you're looking to fish a popper, I suggest for success rate, and most of the time, I think if you're brand new and you're going on a guided trip or something, you're going to get set up with a popper and a dropper. And so this is a picture I pulled off. If you look at the top, all those top ones are some type of popper, bigger bait, and then you're going to have a dropper. So you see there the different lengths, 6, 18, and 30 inches. But you're going to have that first hook set, right? That first fly is going to be the bigger one, and you're going to have something small off the back. And so hope I'm not giving away any tips here, but I've had the most success on the Caney with my dropper being a little pink shrimp. And so if you think about it, you want to have that first one set up just like normal, and then tie with some your tippet. That's why we got these long sections and these big ones, and they're attached to backpacks and neat stuff. You can pull that off and tie your knot on there, and you can get down and you can adjust your depth based on water depth and clarity and what you're seeing, and you can actually adjust that as well as you're fishing. But how long that dropper is. And so maybe that big one gets their attention. That big fly is like, oh, something's up there, but that small one's what they want to eat because they don't have to commit to coming to the top and rising all the way. So higher success rates, I believe, when you're fishing a dropper. So something to think about. A lot of people ask me where to fish. Well, TWRA has a great website. If you type in TWRA and type in fishing and where to fish, it's actually right under the fishing tab. Let me get my laser pointer out. Right here. Type in fishing and it'll actually type out where to fish. And then you click on your region and it actually brings you to an interactive map. It's great. You can see boat launch areas. You can click on specific details and it'll actually show you, waiting suggested. And if you're talking about a dam, you want to make sure you're careful when they're generating, when they're not. We talked about safety. We want to make sure we're safe when we're doing this. So something to think about. If they're generating, you need to know water levels and keep an eye on them because if you're waiting, you might have waited away from the truck and you have to wade back. But if they started generating from one constant flow to maybe a whole one or maybe even two, then you getting back might be really hazardous. And that where you could have walked, maybe it's over your head now. We don't want anybody getting injured. We want to all be safe. So make sure you check that. I always check the TVA app on my phone and or you can check out the website. And if you're in a real rural area or you don't like smartphones, they still post it in newspapers a lot of times a day late or a day early. So you can check that. Oh, hold on. Trout fishing, if you want trout for specifically, same website, just go to fishing and then trout fishing and stocking. So they stock trout here in Tennessee. There are, I would not say there are very few native fish, but you have to work to find those a little harder. So if you want to get the easiest first trout on your new fly fishing setup because you're excited and it's springtime and you're ready to go, it's almost May tomorrow. Go look and see where they've stocked. They've already been stocking. Now, don't get intimidated if you show up when they're stocking and there's, more than just you. Because a lot of people see the stocking schedule and they want to go and they'll go downriver from where they're stocking and trying to hook into those fish real early. So you can go through the website. They talk about where they're stocking. They tell you where, when, a lot of times timing, and how many on a lot of times. And so you think about it. They're giving you all the information. And if you're wanting to learn, all you got to do is go down there and ask them. TWA biologists and everybody that's doing that stocking, they've been nothing but helpful and great to me. Even before I had this job and I was fishing, I've learned more from just having a conversation on the bank with a TWA official, whether that be a warden or a biologist, area manager, than anything, because they're the ones constantly working every day with these species and knowing the problems and how to fish for them too, because they wouldn't do this job if they didn't have a love for them. All right, so here's some quick tips. Bluegill spawning season's upon us. Brim fishing's coming up. I'll give you the secret tip. It's the first full moon in May. Look for those honeycomb patterns in shallow water. I'm going to start taking some days off here pretty soon, or we're going to start hitting this brim fishing pretty hard. But if you want to fish for some bluegill in some open water, and you don't have to have a boat. So this diagram I found, it's amazing. Take a picture of it. Some good tips. Think about how you're casting. Think about, so you're throwing it further and further, right? So when I start casting, I try and do what's considered upstream, and then I sort of do a 45-degree angle and work my way down if I'm wade fishing. So I'll start to my right and then slowly move to the left where I'm casting straight out, and then I'll do it the same to my left. So I sort of cover the water and figure out what's going on underneath. But you don't want to control, your line and where you're moving it with your rod tip. You want to sort of use your line. So as you're pulling it in, you want to keep still. A lot of these fish have been fished, especially if you're on the bank in a easy to access spot. Those the little things like that. As you see here in the picture, keep your rod tip close to the surface and pointed straight towards the fly. That helps eliminate any extra movement you don't need. And then 2 fly lines work for this. I mean, I'm only using floating for the most part. So I'm not really worried about the sinking. Visible portion of the line and the leader, subtle takes. So an indicator method. A lot of people fish with bobbers and bait fish, right? But with fly fishing, it's considered an indicator. They have different types. Here's a type. It's a Rio brand. I just tie a little clove hitch in the middle, and then you sort of see it have action as it gets hit on. The Orvis has some really cool ones now that I don't have in front of me. They're at the office that twist and they attach to the line, and you can do alternating colors. They come in a 3-pack. And so those are pretty cool. Also, a lot of people just use homemade stuff. You can use yarn, you can use pipe cleaners, anything to where it can get some fluff, and you can put a clove hitch in the line. If you don't know how to tie a clove hitch, you can look it up on Google. It's pretty straightforward, but I tie a little clove hitch in there and keep it on there. But the biggest thing when I'm taking my kids fly fishing or even fishing with a spinning rod, if you can put something they can visually see, they can make that connection. And then as they get more advanced, they can take that away. But an indicator lets you also suspend flies where you want to. So if you're the one taking someone new, or you are the new one and someone's taking them with you and they keep moving that indicator up and down, they're just adjusting the depth for you, right? They're trying to figure out where the fish are feeding and where they are. So if you ever go on a guided trip, which I highly suggest, especially if you want to learn, tell the guide when you book them, hey, I'm looking to learn. I'm not looking to steal your spot. I'm just looking to learn, because the learning curve is easily beat when you get in a boat with somebody or fish in the bank with somebody that knows what they're doing, because not only do you see what they're doing, they're helping you, and you can just know next time, I now understand what mending the line is versus, how to actually adjust that indicator, because Taylor's not telling me on a virtual class. I just saw him do it. Now I know why. So that's where the workshops come in. Like the next step from this will be to come to a workshop. But a surface fly and dropper method, we sort of talked about it, a popper and a dropper. The advantage of this is you can potentially catch a fish on either or both flies. I don't think I've ever double hooked up, but most of the time when I'm fishing a dropper, I am actually stripping that line and catching the fish on that dropper. I'd probably say 75 to 80% of the time I'm hooking up. So if I only had the top and didn't have the dropper, I wouldn't be having half the hook sets I'm having. All right, so a lot of people are like, what are you talking about? This is cheap. This is not a cheap sport. Or why don't I have waders yet? You don't need waders. It's almost May. The water feels great. The water temperature is great. You probably have a pair of Chacos or Tevas, or I do suggest something with a little more control than like flip-flops, but they make all types of fancy stuff, and they will sell you all types of fancy stuff if you want to buy it. But you only really need a pair of shorts, some sandals, and as I have to have as a ginger, sunscreen. Sunbum, look, I'm into the Sunbum 50 zinc for the face, look, otherwise I turn into a lobster, and we're not fishing for lobsters with fly equipment. But what other things may you need when you're actually talking about gear? And this is where I would actually suggest you spend some money or get additional gear versus, buying into the hype of all the fancy waders or name brands. So a floating or a drying patch. A floating comes in different types. There's a a type here. You sort of see it's a dab on, so it's almost like a thick hand sanitizer. And you put this on that dry fly to keep it on top. And if you're fishing the same one over and over again, it's naturally going to get a little absorbed and sink. So you can do that type. They also have some spray on types, like a little pump, those old breath mints. If y'all are old enough to remember, some of you maybe, like you spray in your mouth, cock, cock, like so it's sort of like that. It's not aerosol, but it's a pump, so that's floatant. They also sell these little containers with floatant on there, so you can do a little dab of that and keep it floating on top. Nymphs. This is where you want the indicator, something that's going below the surface, and you want to see what's actually happening with the indicator, which can be something like the string method or some yarn, or the indicators, the little circles. And then small split shots. So if you're having trouble casting, take you a split shot. Let's not do the heavy ones. Something real tiny. They're the little alligator Pac-Man mouse, and you just squeeze them on the line. A real small one, and that way you can throw it. That way it helps that line straighten out, helps you get practice, and then as you get better at it, you can actually undo that and take it off. But something really easy to keep around, especially if you're fishing and learning. I'd rather you learn with a split shot on there and get better at casting versus getting frustrated and getting tied up. And then streamers, sink tip leaders. We didn't really touch on it too much, but when you're fishing a streamer, sometimes you want to adjust the depth in the water column depending on where you're at. That's a bigger presentation. Maybe it might be better to have a sink tip leader on there. Some of the additional equipment, this is sort of what I left off and left for last, because you don't have to have any of this. You don't have to have a net, but I suggest you do have a net. If you had to pick one of those things, I do suggest a net or a pack vest. Here is what I use. It's nothing fancy. It is the cheapest brand, and I've had it for years. It's great. It's an Allen, nothing fancy. It's a waist pack, and so it's got enough room for your stuff in here. And you can do crossbody, or you can do it like a extra large fanny pack. But it's great. I think it was like $18 back in the day. So I mean, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be the fanciest name brands you've ever heard of. The Sitka of fly fishing. And then waders. The only thing I will say, typically waders for fly fishing specific don't have boots. So that's why boots are on there. And that picture I like because it shows that the bottom sometimes might have nuts or rivets. That way you can actually walk on rocks and stuff like that. So waders a lot of times will be what's called stocking foot or sock foot. And you'll actually slip your foot in there. It's like a wetsuit material where the sock is. And then you'll slip them into the boot and you tie the boot. So it helps you to have better footing when you're wading in some of those rivers and streams. But if you have an old pair of duck hunting waders, that'll definitely work to get you on the water if you don't want to go out there in your shorts. Or maybe if you got to go somewhere after you go fishing, like work, you can definitely wear your boot waders from hunting and go do it. But I did want to plug, if you're in Middle Tennessee, a couple places, they've all helped me. And by them helping me, I think that it makes the community better. So if you have one in East or West Tennessee, that the next class I do, I'd be more than happy to put them up, like that one you mentioned in Knoxville. But every one of these places, I can promise you, you walk into it and tell them you're new and you want to get into it, the first thing they're not going to do is sell you something. So you can tell them that the Tennessee Wildlife Federation sent you, or that you're looking to get into it and you're not spending $1 today. So don't try and make me spend $1. And I promise they'll do it. Any questions I missed, Josh? What do you think?
I don't think so. I think you covered pretty much everything.
What you got for your go-to setup while they're answering these post-knowledge questions?
My go-to is probably just a 9-foot 5-weight rod. I have one from Orvis. I think it's not the Clearwater, but maybe the next one up. It's kind of middle of the road. And right now, coming up, I know the cicada hatch is everyone's freaking out about that. So I'm pretty excited to get out and try to find a fly that looks as close as possible to a cicada. And I know a couple of the shops might have some already tied. So I'm going to go and try
yeah. So I'm realizing as we do this knowledge check, I did forget. We sort of touched on it, but then I sort of skimmed over it. My apologies. If you are between the ages, I think, of 16 and senior, you can get a combo hunting and fishing license. I think it's like 30 something, maybe even cheaper. I think it's like 33 bucks or something. And then you can get your fishing, you have to get a trout stamp. So there's no fly fishing specific license. It's just considered all fishing. And then if you're fishing and targeting trout, or you plan on, harvesting a trout, you need to know your local regulations on streams. It's in the book or online. It's already linked in the email for tomorrow. You'll get with this recording, but that some of them have length requirements. Some of them have how many a day, or if you can take on certain areas. But you have to have a trout stamp specific if you are between the ages, just have the basic license. So 90% of us here have to have a trout stamp. And Josh looked up that earlier to tell you. But to go over these answers, we'll share the results here. Common fly types. A live bait is mainly used for, bobbers and spinning reels and cane poles. And I don't know if I've ever used a live bait on a bait caster, but you can try it if you want. A crankbait, something typically associated with reel fishing, not fly fishing. Wacky worm, I tried to get you there. That's what I consider like a night crawler or an artificial one. So streamers, the big one there is mainly for fly fishing. Identify which rod action is best for beginners and can be used in long and short cast. That's the medium. Your opinion might differ, but for what I'm teaching people, it's a medium action. Which part of the line is typically the longest on a fly reel? And that's the backing. We did real good there. The backing is what basically fills that reel up so that memory isn't created with that fly line, so that way you can get a good smooth presentation. And then when fishing in Tennessee, what is 100%? Look at that trout stamp. Now, I did want to tell you, if you're new, we're doing a basic fishing basics class with Chris Hearn on Thursday. You can still sign up for that. It's free. It's not fly fishing. It is all fishing. But while I have you, I wanted to share this because this is the best free resource that no one ever takes advantage of. All right. So y'all should see, Josh, do you see the Middle Tennessee Fly Fisher website or do you see the PowerPoint?
I see the Middle Tennessee Fly Fishers website. All
right. So this is 100% free. You don't have to be a member. I am a member, but you don't have to log in to be this member. So I logged out just for you to prove it. If you are like, what do I want to do statewide and even some out of state, but I don't know what's in each of these rivers, right? I don't know which stream I want to go to. They have broken it down for you and done all the work for you. And this is 100% free. They're a nonprofit, just like Tennessee Wildlife Federation. If you want to click on the Caney Fork, not only can you see pictures of their members hauling in the fish, it can tell you all about history of the river, how to access it, right? So even mentions in there when generation, when not generation, right? Waiting only with no generation, and then fishing styles, and then all the access points, and then what equipment they suggest, and a hatch chart, all the water flow and everything like that. And then you can actually even buy your license with a link through there to TWRA, because TWRA is where you buy the license on the app or in person at a store. But this is a huge underlooked resource, and I try and tell everyone because it's free. I've made sure that they're okay with me spreading the love. All this knowledge is here. So if you want to go to any of these, like Bedford Lake even, I don't think of Bedford Lake as a fly fishing destination, but they give you all of them. It is one of those private lakes, so you have to pay, I think, a fee or something like that, unless you have a sportsman or something. So the different types of weights and everything like that. And then even what flies. So you can't beat this. It tells you what to use. And so if you're going to go buy some flies and you're only fishing a certain area, it's definitely worth it to go hit those up. And they go all over. This is the White River. So it's all kinds of great stuff. I try to always tell people that because it's free. But also in a fly shop, they'll give you all this information. You just sort of have to know where you're going fishing beforehand. So check out those websites, TWRA, Middle Tennessee Fly Fishers, your local fly shops. And if you want to give us a follow on social media, that'd be great. I know the comms girls would love it if they knew I promoted them as much as I do. We have YouTube videos about fly fishing. I'm including a couple in tomorrow's thank you email with practice on casting and stuff like that. I thought about doing it tonight. and doing it from my garage, but I think that would be terribly unsuccessful. So I'm going to include that link tomorrow with one of our board members showing you how to fly cast. And he's actually on the river doing it with our great video guy. So it's a lot better than I can do on my webcam here. So any questions about that, let me know. We have a fly fishing or trout fishing event this weekend in Elizabethton that still has spots available. I think we're even at a buy one, get one free with your friend. If you're in East Tennessee, for some trout fishing, we provide all the gear. And then I'm doing a fly fishing workshop in Franklin on the 25th of May. It still has a few spots available. I think we're doing 40 people at that one. So it's going to be a bigger event, more of a community style, big snacks, lots of fishing. If you want your fishing friends and you're in Middle Tennessee, make sure to sign up for that one or reach out with some information I can get to you. But anything else, Josh? What you got? What do you think we need?
I think you covered it. Thanks for having me. It was educational for me too.
All right. And if you need Josh, he's got all the social media. I don't know who's a better fly fisher, him or his soon-to-be wife. I won't, say anything, but I would definitely say Jesse's got the bigger pictures on Instagram. Just saying.
Hey, I learned a long time ago. She's definitely better.
Perfect. Well, thanks for watching and tuning in tonight. Thanks, Josh, for helping me. I appreciate it. Help me manage all the administrative parts behind the scenes and giving me his personal advice. And if you want to go fly fishing sometime, reach out, email. Maybe Josh and I'll see you on the stream. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.